Cody, alarming developments over the weekend here in the United States. How are you?
Things are going good.
Good to hear. You know, I was in touch with Ole. A lot of people tune in Monday mornings here expecting to see Light on Conspiracies with Ole Damagard. But as we discussed last week, Ole and his family had to flee Spain because of COVID lockdowns, and they've just arrived in Bali, Indonesia. He's recovering from jet lag, but people can keeping up with the Damagards there. You can go and visit lightonconspiracies.com to get all the latest news about what's happening with Ole and Kim. You can also purchase Cody's book in the shop. If you just scroll down to the tab that says Cody's book and click on that, you can purchase Choosing the Light and learn all about the dark secrets of the Oklahoma City bombing. Cody, we're joined again today by Dr. Gregory Ford, who has a ton of information to share with us, not only about his time in Iraq that we touched on briefly last week, but also about the time that he spent working for former U.S. President Richard Nixon. Dr. Ford, welcome back to the show.
Glad to always be here.
We're pleased to have you. And, you know, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about with regard to your time with President Nixon, it really seems to a lot of people, Dr. Ford, that what's happening right now at the election is not a legitimate vote count, but yet another attempt to overthrow the presidency of Donald Trump. And I have discerned from your previous comments that you're not particularly fond of Donald Trump as a president, but I suspect at the same time you must be extremely opposed to the notion of the Central Intelligence Agency or some other operation trying to remove an elected U.S. president.
Well, I certainly am, of course. That's one of the last things we need to do is have an intelligence-driven, brass hat-led third world state, third world country. Okay, and I saw what had happened with my former boss Richard Nixon when I was on presidential security, and all I can say, I was 19 at the time. All right, and all I can say is we don't need a repeat, okay, of anything even resembling what we saw with George W. Bush, okay, and we don't need another repeat like we had last year, all right, with everybody kind of walking around with a big question mark over their head about who was legitimate, who had experienced this situation in another country, and also we're not too sure about the trust in voting machines. Okay, I don't know anybody even now that trusts the voting machines. So that's a big question. Is hey, we never had these problems before. All of a sudden, we get a system that is easily hackable, easily controllable, and we have a government that's busy saying, "Oh, believe in us, trust us." All right. So that's
right.
Those are my problems. You know, I've been all over the world. I can actually say all over the world, and seen at least 30 different countries is experiencing the same thing that we're experiencing now, and as a result, you know, we're a mess. We're a great big mess.
Yeah. And Cody, you've also been around the world. You've been in countries where these types of things have happened, election uncertainty leading to violence. What can you say about your past experience with that stuff and how things are looking right now in the United States?
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm glad that we're on the show with Dr. Ford. You know, he's been nominated for the Congressional Medal of Honor by General Janet Karpinski over the things that happened in Iraq. So maybe we can get him to talk a little bit about that. But yeah, this voting thing, just like Dr. Ford said, is it's really crazy right now. We've heard about an operation, CIA Operation Scorecard, SCORECARD. And that operation is one in which the CIA hacks elections and influences elections around the world. And after Patriot Act was passed, now in 2001, then now they can use this type of technology here. And it's
But
been
let me pause you a
rumored.
second, Cody. I want to pause you a second because I have no doubt that there are intelligence operations underway that are attempting to manipulate the vote. But this Operation Scorecard, I have a lot of information that suggests that that is disinformation intended to direct us away from the true culprits. There is an organization called Dominion Voting Systems that is involved in a Clinton Foundation project where this group has been involved in elections in Libya, South Africa, other nations where their software has been used to achieve essentially the same result. I want to read to you exactly what it says about Dominion Voting Systems and the Clinton Foundation, because the reason I present this to you, gentlemen, is that the information about Operation Scorecard is coming from Dennis Montgomery, it's coming from Mary Fanning, Dave Janda, various people who I know have injected false information, and when I've asked them specific questions about it, they've refused to answer. They've gone and told people that I'm a troll and this and that. So I know that those people are liars, and now they're back trying to convince people like you, Cody, trying to convince people like Sidney Powell. And this is all very closely related to the London Policy Center, Anthony Schaefer, who I know Dr. Ford doesn't trust. So I got a big red flag all over that Operation Scorecard.
Okay. But whatever your opinion of it is, or hang on a second.
Let me read you this, Cody, because this is from the Clinton Foundation website, and I think this might help shed some light on this. So the Clinton Foundation and the founders of this Dominion Voting Systems got involved in 2014 in something called the Delian Project, and they're talking about democracy through technology. This is one of the Clinton Foundation's famous commitments to action, which is basically exactly the same as a memorandum of understanding, a non-binding document. It's basically just mumbo jumbo. It says in 2014, Dominion Voting committed to providing emerging and post-conflict democracies with access to voting technology through its philanthropic support of the Delian Project. As many emerging democracies suffer from post-electoral violence due to the delay in publishing election results. Over the next 3 years, Dominion Voting will support election technology pilots with donated automated voting machines, providing an improved electoral process and therefore safer elections. As a large number of election staff are women, there will be an emphasis on training women, who will be the first to benefit from the skills transfer and training of using these voting machines. So I just want to point out a few things, because there's all this noise on the internet about this Operation Scorecard. It's deflecting people away from this Delian project. And when I looked further into that, the individuals that are involved with the Delian project are, one of them is this Canadian guy who a Canadian court found guilty of fraud. And they said there was unequivocal evidence of fraud, and he resigned. I'm talking about Jean-Pierre Kingsley and this other guy, John Hollins, who boasts in his CV about his experience in election efforts in Libya. So these are Clinton defenders trying to cover up election frauds in other countries while they perpetrate an election fraud in this country. And I'm sorry to dominate the conversation, but I'm curious to know what you guys think about this information.
Well, I think that there are multiple operations from multiple intelligence agencies, the CCP in China, MI6 in London. It goes on and on to influence, like Dr. Ford said, any kind of electronic voting machine is easily hackable. Any type of electronic transfer network system, fax machines, cell phones, any kind of computer stuff that connects voting tabulation centers and any of that, it can all be hacked, and it can all be done with encrypted algorithms now that hide the hacking and all kinds of stuff. So when it gets into that fuzzy world of electronic voter fraud, There is a lot of rumor, propaganda. I'm sure there's a bunch of Russian programs that we don't know about. A lot of this stuff, I'm sure, is classified, like the Stuxnet virus was in Iran and the centrifuges, and then us civilians heard about it later after it was already deployed and after it was already used. So whatever's going on, I am sure that there's multiple layers of fraud and multiple layers of corruption in this United States election. You got two groups vying for power, and they'll do anything to do it. In 2000, we had the hanging Chad with Bush and Gore with that election. That was fraught with corruption as well. So it's getting to be the standard norm. All I can hope is that, the truth and the light of whatever has really happened here comes to light either in the courts or otherwise. But we're probably never going to know how deep it's really been.
Yeah. But isn't there a lot of evidence, gentlemen, that what's happening in the streets in terms of the news, sort of socially engineering the public to believe that Joe Biden has been elected president? They want everybody who's out in the street partying in the parks here in New York and elsewhere to become enraged if and when Donald Trump succeeds in proving that there was voter fraud. Don't you think that's a big danger, Dr. Ford?
Yes, I do, of course. Now, there's different aspects to this, and in that respect is that we have a situation where years ago, the most dramatic event that happened to this country was 9/11. And everybody probably says, oh, well, that's ancient history. No, that was a test bed. That was a test bed to test the American people on everything that they believed and that they had inculcated with a sense of what the government had told them, had been telling them. And I of course, with Barbara Honegger, walking back this reverse engineering, we have seen virtually everything, all the systems that we hold dear and value as they've been under attack since 9/11 in that sense. And so we have a situation right now where we have the media, as we're speaking here, the media is telling people, okay, here's what you're going to say, here's what you're going to assume, and the government says so. And of course, what these forces that be, are finding out as in election engineering, which is, I see it all over the screen right now, election engineering and reverse engineering of our country's policies. What we have is a situation where at least 75 to 80% can be manipulated through the media, where people hear something and they have an authoritative figure, ostensibly government approved, telling them, here's what's going on, here's what you're going to think, here's what you're going to vote, and here's how you're going to behave afterwards. And so we have 75 to 80% that are predictably brought into the loop, and that's what we're seeing. I'm seeing every single election. All right, and this was doubly reinforced at on 9/11, and also a new project was brought in. I saw this at the time with Saudi Arabia being an intermediary, Saudi Arabia, and of course its associate Israel, and where the situation was brought in under what was called Copper Green, Operation Copper Green. Nobody's ever heard of Copper Green. Well, Copper Green virtually controls 172 to 178 countries right now around the globe, where their resources are controlled, quantified, manipulated, and also their manual labor is quantified and manipulated. And most important, as Roy, what was his name? Roy, the fellow who was the lawyer to Trump, Mr. Trump, said,
Cohn,
okay,
Roy Cohn.
Roy Cohn, thank you. Yes, Roy Cohn said the situation is that it doesn't matter what we see, it doesn't matter what we have, who we have running in an election. What matters is who counts the votes, who tallies the
I thought that
votes.
was Stalin who
Okay,
said that.
no, that was Roy Cohn. Okay, and he also said, and this is something to keep in mind with the Supreme Court. He said he doesn't care about courts. He doesn't care about lawyers. He cares about who the judges are. All right. So I have that in quotes from Roy Cohn. All right.
Mm.
So as a result, though, and yes, Stalin did say that. All right. I know that because I was actually living and working in the former Soviet Union.
Wow.
So and I heard all of these little diatribes, metaphors, and euphemisms from the people that actually had to suffer that suppression, and suffer they did. So, and when I find, and that's another thing, when I find people being so openly friendly and receptive of the idea of an American president believing a former competitive politician like Vladimir Putin, I have to cringe. I have to be alarmed. All right, I can say that right now, and we can put it in this respect: is that when Vladimir Putin has an election, does anybody trust that election? Does anybody trust those results? Well, he controls the voting machines and the system, as we're beginning to see, as I'm beginning to see in this situation we have now.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, it seems like we've got a situation where perhaps associates of the Clinton Foundation have been controlling the voting machines. This, Delian Project and Dominion voting. When I hear Dominion voting, I'm reminded of language from Cecil Rhodes' 200-year plan to control the world, where through the Rhodes Scholarship Program, British Dominion citizens of Canada, the United States, Australia, and New Zealand are co-opted into this program, which we know Bill Clinton is a Rhodes Scholar. That's a conversation perhaps for another day. I want to make sure people who are watching us right now, Dr. Ford, are aware of you and your background. In addition to your storied history in the U.S. Army as a medical doctor, you are now an author. You wrote the book Midnight in Samara, the true story of weapons of mass destruction, greed, and high crimes in Iraq. People can purchase that on Kindle or as a hardcover book from Amazon and other book retailers. And what I'd like to do is in just under 15 minutes, when we begin our sponsor exclusive show on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, I want to get in depth in talking about how these types of CIA operations have run in the past. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that the CIA, at the very least, had some involvement in the planning of, the execution of, the cover-up of, and the FBI, by the way, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the political assassination of Richard Nixon in terms of him, as I see it, being forced to resign. I understand he was trying to sort of play chess with the CIA by obtaining evidence related to the Kennedy assassination because Nixon was well aware of the power that the CIA had over the presidency. I also suspect that Donald Trump is aware of that power. The first speech that he gave as president, if I'm not mistaken, was right in front of the CIA, what is it called? The Wall of Glory or something? Cody, what's the name of this wall at the Langley CIA? The Wall of Honor.
Right, the Wall of Honor.
It's got each year has a little square box, and it tells you the year, and then it has a star for each of the personnel that were lost. It doesn't have their names, but it just has the stars.
Right, and I thought it was quite interesting that Donald Trump chose that to be his location for his first speech. We also recall that New York scumbag, I mean Senator Chuck Schumer, went on to Rachel Maddow and warned Donald Trump that if you mess with the intelligence agencies, they have 6 ways until Sunday to get back at you. Well, we've seen the Russia collusion, Russia hacked the election. That was way number 1. There was no evidence of that, yet it seems to me a lot of Biden voters jumped on the Russia hacked train, even though there's been no evidence presented until this day. We haven't seen any evidence that indicates hacking, no forensic evidence of hacking. We've also seen them try to impeach Donald Trump over this. We've seen the urination dossier, no evidence of any of that. Now, here we are less than a week after the last election, and there is a tremendous amount of evidence coming forward in terms of firsthand eyewitness testimony from poll watchers who were thrown out. We've got this evidence of the voting systems being provided by an individual who is linked to a Clinton Foundation operation that has already been accused of fraud and been involved in elections in Libya, where we know the people of Libya are objecting aggressively to the hijacking of their government and their electoral system. I'm very concerned that that's happening here, and I want to go into some details of your time with President Nixon, Dr. Ford. We'll get deeply into that in about 5 minutes, but can you give everybody an overview of what your role was and some of the things you learned while working for President Nixon?
Sure. Boy, that's ancient history, but I'll do my best. Now, this was, of course, was 1972 to 1973. I was recruited and by the Coast Guard, the U.S. Coast Guard, and trained. It took 2 years of training to include boot camp and the security situation that was San Clemente, the Western White House at Costa de Pacifica, San Clemente. And so I went there. Of course, I was just, I had to do 2 years on Terminal Island, and surprise, who do I run into on Terminal Island, San Pedro, California? I run into all the plumbers, okay? The CIA plumbers.
Let's remind people who those guys are. The plumbers were supposed to be Nixon's private intelligence force cleaning up leaks, right?
Well, there's more to it than that. From what I saw, and it's only from what I saw, and of course, with all of the security team talking, we all spoke, was that Richard Nixon, President Nixon, our boss, simply did not trust what was going on. He knew something was up. He was innately suspicious. And all we could do as security members is do our job, sit there and try to inculcate and be protective of our boss in every respect. So we basically had to be apolitical, but we still heard. Okay, that's just the human condition. So,
and Dr. Ford, the plumbers were basically Frank Sturgis, G. Gordon Liddy, E. Howard Hunt. Who else was among the plumbers?
G. Gordon Liddy, Howard Hunt, right, and Charles Colson. Did you mention Charles Colson?
No, but these guys are all CIA agents, aren't they?
Oh yes, right up to their eyeballs. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And they were double-crossing Nixon. We have a lot of reason. I'm sorry to keep interrupting you, but we only have a moment left. And this is what we're going to be getting to in the sponsor-exclusive show that's about to begin. I want to get in depth on what your feeling was in meeting these guys, because I've always suspected that these Nixon plumbers, who the president thought were there to protect him, I think they set him up, leaving evidence at the crime scene, et cetera. And we'll get your opinion, Dr. Ford, when we continue with the sponsor-exclusive show. Before we depart, I want to remind people that they should absolutely be picking up Dr. Ford's book, Midnight in Samara. You can get it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. It's a fantastic book about Dr. Ford's time in Iraq, the harrowing details of his torture and exposure of the true story of weapons of mass destruction, greed, and high crimes in Iraq. I also want to make sure people check out Cody's book on lightonconspiracies.com, Choosing the Light, The Dark Secrets of the Oklahoma City Bombing. Dr. Ford's story and Cody's story are closely connected in that Cody's told us how the destruction of the Murrah building was another effort to cover up some of the things that you were aware of in Iraq, Dr. Ford. Real quickly, just a minute to take us out to the next show. Something you'd like to say, Dr. Ford?
No, well, you're absolutely tracking 100%. Yes, our former president, Richard Nixon, did incredible things for the American people, and he was never appreciated in that respect. And the thing is that, yes, I need to give a little history that Richard Nixon had with the East Coast establishment, as in Prescott Bush and George H.W. Bush.
Ooh.
And what Nixon, President Nixon had done with the SALT I and SALT II agreements, and how he laid the groundwork for them, and why he was actually destroyed, why
Absolutely.
he was removed, and he was about to be impeached, and and I know exactly where that order came from and why it was done. So
we'll get into
I'd
detail
be
on
more than
that
glad to mention
in just 5 minutes. We've
to
got
your
a
listeners.
picture right here of a young Richard Nixon with Prescott Bush and Jack Ruby, the man who would later assassinate Lee Harvey Oswald, the alleged assassin of John F. Kennedy. Cody, real quick, anything you want to say before we transition over to the sponsor exclusive show?
No, I just wanted to ask Dr. Ford if his opinion was, when Gerald Ford pardoned Nixon after the Watergate fiasco and gave the Vietnam veterans blanket amnesty and immunity, do you think that was done, to cover up and decoy and distract everyone away from Nixon, with the anti-draft movement and all that stuff? It's an interesting question.
I think we don't have time now because we're just about out of time, but we'll get into that answer right away, less than 3 minutes, as soon as we resume on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Thanks to all of our sponsors. We'll see everybody over there in just 2 minutes. Thanks for watching.